Let us now speak of the Miami Heat and welcoming on a first-time guest. I'm really excited to have him on. I've been following his work for a while. Does some of the best film breakdowns, maybe the best film breakdowns of the Miami Heat from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Brady Hawk, how you doing, man?
Doing great. Thank you for having me on. I'm ready to dive into the X's and O's of Miami Heat world.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's talk about last year first. That's usually how I like to do this, is kind of talk about last year, see what we can take away as it relates to this year. So obviously they had the Jimmy saga. He plays 25 games. They move him around the deadline, bring in Andrew Wiggins. Then they had that weird stretch where I think they were like 2-10 in close games that kind of wrecked their season. Um, but as it might relate to this year, what were some of your takeaways from last year as we look forward to trying to project what they're going to do this season?
Yeah, I joke around saying we're going to talk about the X's and O's, but it's hard, honestly, when you talk about last season to only dive into that because there was the Jimmy Butler part of it. There was so much going behind the scenes that when you say, let's reflect on last season felt like two seasons to me. It felt like there was that break at the trade deadline post Jimmy that just felt like a brand new season. It just felt like almost like a new team because they had to hand the keys over to Bam and Tyler just in a different way, where it was more so just you're not having that number one guy, having to adjust the way they played. So pre Jimmy, it was a mess, and that feels ancient at this point. But I will say, but post Jimmy and things that they could relay into this season, uh, I mean, they add Davion Mitchell into the fold that I don't think many expected he would pop to that extent for them that season. The defensive stuff, the offensive output he was kind of putting out. Uh, you add Andrew Wiggins, which was a little choppy because he didn't play a lot. He was kind of available here and there, and he just wasn't ultra aggressive consistently for them. So it kind of put them in a rough spot. So obviously they fall into that 8 seed and play-in. They win 2 playing games in Miami Heat fashion. And when everybody counts them out and thinks, okay, this team has no chance, they can't score, they can't defend, they can't do this, they go and win 2 playing games. And then we saw what ended up happening against Cleveland, which is what kind of blended into their offseason moves and why they felt they needed to improve in certain areas. So last year was just so odd because you really couldn't put your finger on anything that they were doing well. Because as you said, they would do things well at a certain point and then it would fall apart in crunch time, where they would kind of have, Bam kind of turned it around late in the season, which I thought was kind of one of the more important pieces of last season, was that you had the Jimmy Butler thing hanging over. Bam was not playing his best basketball around that time, pre-All-Star break. He just didn't have the jumper. He didn't have the short jumper. The bunnies weren't falling. The scoring wasn't coming consistently. The big story at that time was Tyler Herro was popping. He was averaging, 24, 25 points a game, ends up being an All-Star. Later in the season, we just saw Bam kind of turn it up a little bit. Kind of those jumpers were falling. So that was kind of one of the positives. So it was just kind of an adjustment year. People are kind of calling this year the bridge year, but it kind of felt like post All-Star break last year was almost their bridge year because it was kind of the point in time where they were just figuring everything out.
Yeah, it really was a disjointed group, and you're bringing in new guys and Mitchell and Wiggins who, in theory would fit in, but also, especially with the attention to detail that the Heat have, it can be difficult to integrate them. And yeah, I mean, they just didn't have the team that they thought that they were going to have for a while. Yeah, let's look ahead, I guess, to this year, and maybe the place I want to start, is with Norman Powell, because he is the new piece that they brought in essentially for free. I mean, they're willing to pay him. Maybe they'll extend him. I guess we'll see on that. But it was largely ancillary pieces that they sent out for him in terms of the salary match. Didn't have to give up much to get him. So, how do you see him fitting in, both in the absence of Tyler Herro to start the season, and then once he comes back?
Yeah, so it was really exciting. I mean, when they first got him, thinking about what he could be next to Tyler Herro, it was like finally getting that second scoring piece that honestly they thought Terry Rozier was going to be at the time as maybe that extra piece in the backcourt. And this just felt a little bit more just smoother. It just felt like a smoother piece next to Tyler to kind of figure out the offense. And now things kind of just shifted, where now it's you got to carry the load. You're the number one guy offensively. Now it's time that scouting reports are going to be on Norman Powell. This isn't, you don't have the James Harden or the Kawhi Leonard anymore. It's going to be about a month or two where he's going to have a lot of responsibility in this team. And as we've seen in preseason, he's done a really good job with it. I mean, he's a natural scorer, as we know. He can get to his spots. The 3 ball, if he catches at any point, he can fire. But he's kind of been doing a lot of stuff off the dribble. He's getting into the paint, working that floater. So it's going to be interesting to see pre-Tyler. But I think the exciting thing for Miami Heat fans is the Tyler Herro Powell just piece of this. Because if you look back to in just recent time with Tyler Herro, he didn't play as long as Tyler Herro and Duncan Robinson played together. It felt like 6 years of just over and over, but they didn't play a lot next to each other. Like it was just kind of on and off kind of thing. They couldn't because
they wouldn't survive. Yeah,
literally they couldn't survive. They couldn't survive the defense. But when they did do it, the offense looked great. It would pop because of you have two snipers on the floor next to each other. Last year, one of the best offensive ratings in terms of two-man pairings was Alec Burks and Tyler Herro. I mean, it didn't survive long enough for them to do it for long pockets of the game, but the offense was there. It was just adding an extra shooter next to him. And now you add Norman Powell, who kind of just takes that to a whole new level. That is not a slouch on defense. They've kind of amped them up, and even in this preseason where he's a bigger player in general that maybe if he's playing against four high-level defenders in certain lineups, he'll get picked on. But with Tyler Herro out there, it's not going to happen as often. But it just seems like there's a real offensive pop to those two guys playing next to each other. So that fit itself should be fun. I think the way Spo is viewing it, at least early in the year, is I think you're going to see a lot of staggering with him, where right now they're doing this kind of hockey shift in preseason where it's Powell's just running with the starting lineup. They're trying to get as many reps with that unit as possible. But we saw it a little bit in the last game where he's running with the second unit, and I think that's just what you're going to expect, where he's going to be anchoring lineups for this team offensively to kind of keep them afloat. So that acquisition in itself, I think, is going to be fun. I mean, honestly, I'm still counting the Davion and Wiggins acquisitions almost like it's kind of a new piece here because they're treating them differently this year. I mean, last year was kind of throwing him out there into the fire, go figure it out. We're not really putting you in a new role. This year it kind of changes. I mean, Wiggins' responsibility is grown, especially with Tyler. I mean, I almost feel like Wiggins' responsibility changed more than Powell's did with Tyler going down, because Powell is still going to be Powell. They're still going to keep him off the catch as much as possible because of that factor, where Wiggins is going to have to be that guy, it feels like, for certain pockets of the game. So they're going to use him differently. He's looked really good in camp. We'll see how much that stuff goes with the finishing and the three-point shooting and all of that. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I think and then you have Simone Fontecchio, who's just kind of another acquisition down at the bottom that I think a lot of fans will see a lot of this season. I mean, when you look at the shooting, I know I just mentioned Tyler and Powell playing next to each other, but you go down the rest of the roster, Miami usually has that specialist at the end of the rotation. I mean, they find these guys that they'll end up plugging in at some point in the bottom of the rotation, or just on the outside, they'll throw in randomly. That's Fontecchio this year. It feels like at least early in the year without Tyler, he's going to be getting reps off the bench. So they got some new pieces. They got some, Spo can figure some new things out that he hasn't been able to the last few years. And it just feels a little bit smoother than it has in years past.
Yeah, you mentioned a number of guys there. I wanted to go back to what you were saying with Herro and Norman Powell and the idea of them playing together. And, this has always been a little bit of the struggle with Herro as a major piece, and Duncan Robinson as well, because they struggled to play together. Norm Powell is not necessarily someone who's had a target on his back. And, Jeff Van Gundy was saying he got a lot better with the Clippers a year ago. And in his Toronto days, I thought he actually was a quality defender, really fell off in Portland and then with the Clippers. But do you think, that your point guard and shooting guard when Tyler comes back and then Mitchell comes off the bench? Or do you think they bring Powell off the bench?
I think Herro and Powell is your starting backcourt. I mean, Miami of all teams will preach the positionless thing. I mean, you've seen Caleb Martin play starting four for this team for how many years? Like they've kind of leaned into this thing where they don't care about positions. And I think what makes it easier, which is kind of what solidified this for me in the offseason, was their starting four this year is essentially going to be their point guard, if you want to name it, positions, Nikola Jovic. Like he's going to be the guy that's going to be running a lot of actions, bringing the ball down the floor. I mean, we know Bam can do it too, but I don't think they want to put that pressure on him again, where he's constantly having to bring the ball down the floor. It kind of wears on you during the season. But I do think it is Herro and Powell that ended up starting. I think Davion gets the spot start to start the year, just because they're going to just lean into their guy that they trust the most defensively and figure all that out. But I do think it's going to end up being Davion off the bench. And we'll see. I mean, they've done the thing before with the scorer off the bench with the other guy, kind of plugging in the defensive guy, in the backcourt. So I think they're looking for something new. They know that their offensive problems have hit a wall. Like the defense is great and all. Like it gets you to a point in the playoffs when it bogs down. It looks amazing. But the only way to get these regular season wins, like you're seeing these teams, and it became a joke almost in Heat World, where they play some of these worst teams in the East or West and they'd lose. It's just they didn't have the offensive firepower to even beat teams like that on a random Tuesday night in January. Like they just didn't. So you have to just lean into it at a certain point. It feels like that's the point they're at. Like we'll talk about it, I'm sure, in a little bit, what they're leaning into offensively and kind of this new style. But it just feels like they have to lean into their best players, lean into their best scorers. And it seems like they're going to start whenever Tyler Herro returns in about a month or two, he's probably going to be starting next to Powell.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, because you think, I mean, definitely offensively, I think that would work exceedingly well, and especially if they're going to have Nikola Jovic out there as well. I'm not really concerned about, oh well, we don't have a point guard. I mean, number one, Davion Mitchell is no better a point guard than those guys are really either.
Yeah.
On the offensive end, it's more about the ability to guard the ball, where you've got Wiggins and Bam can do some switching, but that's not really a group that's going to do a lot of switching. I think we'll just see Bam closer to the basket. Maybe they would decide that if they're going to go with that group, it makes more sense to get the rim protection of Ware and Adebayo together. I know they're trending towards starting Jovic at the start of the season when they're going to need more offense on the floor. But that would be my concern, is that you basically have one guy who can guard the ball in Andrew Wiggins, and most teams have two threats that you're going to have to deal with. So I'm not saying that's the wrong decision, but there are some downsides to that for sure.
Yeah, I would say the Jovic thing is interesting because a lot of people are talking about that, where when Tyler returns, it is possible that Ware cuts back in. That was my original thought when it first happened. Now, with everything transpiring now, with the whole Ware situation, Jovic getting the extension and everything going on, it almost thinks they're just going to just totally lean into this Jovic thing. And the backup big situation in Miami right now is pretty weird. So it feels like if they work Khalil into this backup rotation big role for X amount of games, I think they'll just leave it. But in theory, you're right. I mean, it just does seem like on paper that best lineup would be Khalil, just because you can move Bam and Wiggins around on the perimeter. The question is going to be how Nico looks on defense, because I don't expect him to be a ball stopper on the perimeter for sure. But I do feel like they're going to be doing a lot of switching other than 1-5 pick and rolls. Like if it's not that, I think they're just going to switch everything, kind of layer out. We'll see what Nico looks like. And the other factor is if Nico's not able to move his feet at that level and they see that, there's a chance, which it could hurt them. It's hurt them in the past, but there's certain teams where you put Nico on the 5 and then Bam ends up playing the 4 defensively anyway, because there's a lot of teams that we look out there other than the main guys out there, like Jokic and all these others. They'll make the big beat you. Like they'll say, go play post ball. Like go give him the ball and post up Nikola Jovic, and then we'll run out from there. Like that's what they'll lean into. So it's interesting. It really all does depend on the trends. It's funny almost pinning Khalil, Ware, and Jovic against each other early in the season. That's what it's kind of been in camp. But it does feel like it's a one-on-one battle right now to see who fits what lineups. Like there's 4 guys that are they're locked into their role. They're locked into their lineup. They're locked into the starting lineup when fully healthy. And it's just these 2 guys figuring out what makes more sense for this team. And it just seems like in the past, Spo has kind of been sticking to one thing. It's always been like, okay, we're going with this. We're not really going to change, especially in the regular season. This is the most open-minded I've seen him with lineups in a long time. Like he is legitimately seems like he's willing to do whatever. Like whoever breaks out at a certain time, whatever lineup works, he'll move around anybody. So it really does come down to those 2 guys showing what they have on defense.
Yeah, they really have a lot of guys that you don't quite know what to expect from, which could be a good thing and could be a bad thing. Whether it's where Jovic, he got the extension, but he's been in and out of the lineup, but he's looking a lot better early in camp. Davion Mitchell, Andrew Wiggins, as you noted, have been with the team for 25 games or so. Here, when he comes back from injury, we'll see whether he's able to still be at an all-star level the way he was last year, or whether there's a regression. Norman Powell is new to the team as well. Fontecchio is new to the team. Jaime Jaquez is coming off a down year, but still has some promise. So it really, other than Bam, there isn't necessarily that one guy that's supposed like, all right, this is just who I'm going to lean on. This is what I know works. So it does make sense to me that there would be that level of experimentation.
It's funny you say that, because when you just mentioned that, it feels like there's one guy that Spo does trust more than any of these other guys. Bam is for sure. But Davion is somebody that even though he's only been here for X amount of games, he is going to lean on him a ton. And I know we're going to get to probably the closing lineup stuff later, but it makes it real interesting because of how much he trusts him. And we'll see what he ends up, is he going to live up to the expectations that he set, that bar that he set last season? But he does trust him at another level. Wiggins is kind of the swing factor, it feels like, of this season, because I think Spo does trust him to an extent. but it's just about seeing it consistently. I mean, we know what he can do for quarters on time where he can run off points and the defense that he can bring. But it's like, are you expecting him to drop 21 points a game consistently, like on a points per game basis? Probably not. Like it's kind of an on and off thing with these guys. So we'll see who ends up trusting. I mean, I know he does trust Tyler, but it does get a little weird at the end of games, especially with some of these lineups. The thing is, that's funny. They've always had this thing where it's like, we can sit here right now and say, okay, they could throw this lineup out there and be really good offensively, or they could throw this lineup out there and be good, really good defensively. The issue is there's just a weird balance of what you want to lean into, because Spo always leans into the defensive lineup. It's what it always comes back to. But I almost think this year's the year, maybe we say this a lot, but this year's the year that he almost leans into some of these more offensive lineups and just says, we're going to get scored on. In this new NBA where everybody can score, we're going to have to give up a few buckets in certain points in the game, but we have to match the scoring to a certain extent. So as much as like certain things may look groggy at certain points in the game, if Wiggins and Bam are your only defenders on the floor, I feel like they almost have to live with it at certain points of the regular season. At playoffs, I get it. Playoffs, like every possession matters. You have to get stops. But in the regular season, you got to be able to score.
No, I think that'll be an interesting change in philosophy. You mentioned what Davion did. I mean, he was always someone who had some potential, but he pretty much got dumped twice in the course of a year. And all of a sudden he comes in and he's a stalwart for this group. Is one of the heroes of their play-in win. What did they suddenly get from him? And do you think he can keep that going?
That's the big question of the season. I mean, you're talking about a guy that shot 45% from three, like on good volume. Like he was just so confident, and it wasn't all off the catch. Yes, he got a lot of open looks because teams, they don't respect his shot. So he was just taking a whole lot of open shots based off of Bam and Tyler getting attention. He was just making them. But it really wasn't just that. I mean, we're talking about a situation where they don't have that on-ball guard last season at that point in the year when they were trying to adjust with the whole Jimmy thing. He came in and was running a lot of pick and rolls, and he was so successful with it. I mean, coming from a guy that I don't think many expected him to be a high, especially Miami, like come in and just be like a high usage pick and roll player, and the passes in the pocket pass, the Bam that was working, really great finisher. Just kind of, we know he's strong. He's a bulldog. I mean, he can get down to the rim, kind of bully you, but he was finishing at a really high level, getting to the free throw line. Like he almost set the bar too high where you have to expect regression. Like he's not going to shoot 45% from three again. But in his case, with his point, he's been kind of trying to make over the last few weeks is like, our roster got better. We have more scores. That makes teams have to leave me even more often. So I'm going to get even better looks from three. And if teams start to adjust and even start closing out a little bit harder, it feels like that's what he wants. The whole goal here is for them to respect it just a little bit, just so he can start flying off closeouts and start playing his bully ball again. So it's tough to really figure out what we're going to expect. The thing is that he's going to be the sixth man of this team. And when he comes in with like 6 minutes left in the first quarter, he's not walking off the court till halftime. Like Spo never takes him out the game. Once he goes out there, he's not coming off the court. So there's an expectation of him offensively, I guess, that he set a certain bar. But he was just really good defensively, as you talked about the perimeter stuff. I mean, that's why it probably doesn't end up mattering as much with the Herro Powell thing, just because of how many minutes Mitchell is going to be getting. The baseline, guarding that much often, ball handlers pressuring, getting around screens, all that stuff, it was just really good for them. So, like I said, he set the bar extremely high. So we're going to see if he can live up to these expectations. But it does seem like his role is going to regress just enough that it'll maybe help him out with kind of easing that up a little bit.
Well, and if they do play with more of a space floor this year, I think that will help. Like you alluded to, the revelation with him was his ability to get to the basket. I would say even more than the shooting. He was taking 3.5, 4 per 36. That's a very low number for a guard, and 80% of those were uncontested. So that's almost like a center-like number.
Yeah.
So teams were kind of letting him shoot, and maybe the scouting report on that will change. But if so, that would open up his drive game a little more. He shot 54% from two, and he really was generating a reasonable number of shots in the lane. It's not like he was just like taking long twos off the pick and roll. That was pretty much not a part of the arsenal at all. So that was pretty interesting. He's not an unbelievable finisher, but he's getting there. And for a small guard, he was really, when they struggled to generate offense, he was their number 2 creator at times last year. And then, of course, I've always thought he's like a little bit overrated by the people who put him in like the absolute top echelon of guards, because I don't think he's as disruptive as the best guards as an off-ball defender, like a Caruso or a Jalen Suggs, someone like that. But certainly on the ball, he can cause guys some problems. So, and that's, as we noted, is a skill set they desperately need on this team. So it'll be fascinating to see how his game evolves. But like, obviously he came in and played at like a very solid, at minimum, third guard level, and I thought they did well to get him on the contract that they did coming back.
They needed somebody when Jimmy left to get paint touches, and I don't think anybody expected him to be taking Jimmy Butler's like paint touch numbers, but he pretty much did, as you mentioned. Like he was just getting there so often, getting 2 feet in the paint. They added a little bit more to that this year, I guess, with some players they add that I think can get a little bit more rim pressure, put more. But he was it last year. He was it. The defense thing is interesting just because I can see what you're saying there, because the off-ball thing is not as disruptive. But the screen navigation, to me, like when I just watch him play, is just, it's such a skill. Like I don't see many players get around screens the way he does. And if he's almost late to getting around a screen, almost every time it's an offensive foul because he's falling to the ground, and it's almost every time it's a moving screen. Like he's able to get through, and it really bothers these ball handlers, like the way he kind of do that. So I think what it helps as well is I don't think we just haven't seen that in Miami in a long time. I mean, a lot of the guards that we're talking about over the last few years, if it's Tyler, if it's Duncan, if it's even Goran or Kendrick Nunn, or we can go down the line, it's been offensive guard play. Like it hasn't been that type of defensive in your face, I'm going to stop. Like it's been your wings and your center that have been guarding most of these elite point guards over the last few years. So credit to him for coming in and kind of turning it around offensively. We'll see if he could play at that level, but it seems like, I mean, the number one thing with young players especially is he's so confident right now. Like he is just such a confident player. And you add in being a defensive player and add in confidence. I mean, that's a heck of a tandem in the NBA.
All right, you teased this a little bit, and I'm excited to talk about it now because I have not been too locked in on these guys in the preseason. You mentioned that they're going to be trying to do some new things offensively. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you know that he knows Spo, every year he says they're going to play faster. Like he always says that there's going to be this thing where they're going to play at a higher pace, and it's game 4 of the season, and they're bogging down into the half court. Part of that is just because of the personnel over the last few years. I mean, we could talk about D Wade and late D Wade years. I mean, it's what's going to happen. He's going to walk the ball down the floor, and they're going to play into the half court. We talk about this whole Jimmy era. As much as Jimmy, we think about the fast break dunks or different things he likes to run on the break, and he's a dog. But ultimately, his offensive game translated to, I'm going to walk the ball down the floor. I'm going to put my back to the basket. I'm going to kind of get to the free throw line and slow the game down. It was just never a fast-paced style. Where this is the first year where it's like we're looking at this roster, and you look at, if you really look at the rotation and the average age, like it's down there. Like it's 24, 25 years old, what this average age of this rotation is going to be. It just seems like you're going to have to lean into that. You have to lean into the youth. This is not a team where you want to slow things down. And Spo has said that. They're really drilling it. I know they were doing a ton of stuff in training camp where it was like 16-second shot clocks in all scrimmages, just trying to get the ball down the floor. It was like if you had to get the ball past half court in 3 or 4 seconds, like it was a 3-second violation where you can get the ball past half court. Like they are trying to drill this down to get these guys playing faster. And if you go down the line, I mean, Nikola Jovic, I said, is going to have the ball in his hands a lot. Loves to run. They have a rookie that's going to be interesting. I don't know if he's going to be playing, but he just played in this last game, and he was absolutely running up and down the floor. So if you're going to lean into that, that's another thing. Davion Mitchell, as we're talking about, he's speed. He wants to get out and go. Like I can go down the line. It's just all these guys want to play fast. It's just a bunch of young guys. So it does seem like this is the year where it becomes a reality, like where they actually do play faster. Maybe you can check back with me in January and call me a liar, because they start slowing down. It feels like every year, halfway through the year, when it kind of gets to that point. But it does seem like they have enough young guys on this roster where that might not happen. So we'll see if that's able to happen. I know the other thing that they're adjusting is, like I said, the defense. We know about Bam switching out on the perimeter a ton. We've seen that. Now they have Kalel that makes it just a lot easier. They can switch Bam actually out on the perimeter and not have to totally worry about it consistently. But if Ware's not out there, I think you're going to see a lot of switching with your 2 through 4s. Something else we'll probably talk about later. It's like they don't really have any 4 on this roster. I mean, Nikola Jovic is a 4, I guess. And if you ask me about anybody else, I mean, you call Bam, I guess, a 4, but they don't have a lot of 4s. Like it's just a lot of guys that are going to have to start playing up defensively. So they're going to lean these lineups where it's going to be a lot of switching. It's going to be a lot of switching across the board, maybe even 1 through 4. And they'll have to figure that stuff out. That's something that they kind of went away from last year that they're going to have to adjust back to. But the big adjustment is the speed. Can it sustain? And just can you lean into your young guys and be a good team in the Eastern Conference? Like, is that a good formula for this team?
Yeah, and certainly for a team that, especially at the beginning of the year, doesn't have that premium creator who you think is going to really be drawing to a lot to be able to get out it and run would be very useful for them. Um, you talked about some of these young guys. Let's hit on some of them in turn, just so what the state of their games are and where they need to improve or can improve for this season. Who you want to start with first?
Yeah, so I mean, Kalel's the big name. I mean, Kalel's the one that keeps coming up because Spo called him out again about kind of impacting winning is what Spo calls it, where he goes out there and he drops 18 and 13 in a preseason game. But there's just pockets where it's a little lackadaisical, where he could kind of be bringing at another level. He calls him out the following game. He goes out there and drops 29 and 14 in just exciting fashion, where he's kind of shooting threes over Wemby. He's defending Wemby and blocking him. He's kind of giving full effort. And that's the whole thing here. It's not like Spo is trying to go at this second year player just because he doesn't like him. They see what his ceiling is. Like they see these flashes in preseason or different games. It's funny. He actually did it last year against the Spurs and Wemby as well. But he has these flashes where he kind of looks at this certain level that they just want him to get to that. I mean, probably the three ball was working in this last game, but I don't think they ultimately want that. They want somebody with Kalel that's screening, rolling, ready for the lob pass, doing all the extra things, kicking out the shooters, kind of working on the decision making. And defensively is the number one thing they want to see improve. I mean, he's good at just shot blocking and everything and kind of being a deterrent around the rim, but he's kind of your typical young big that he kind of jumps for no reason, gets out of position of a rebound. They wanted him to put on size. He did a little bit of that, but it still gets to a point now, especially with these young bigs. It's like they played their whole life in high school where they just got to put their hands up and grab the rebound. They're not used to just putting a body on somebody and boxing out and doing all this stuff, where that's the other thing that they're drilling with him. So I would say Kalel's kind of the more unique cases of this season because it was kind of a battle between Jovic and Kalel about who would pop. But I think they know what Jovic is going to be for them this season, and Kalel is kind of the unknown, which is kind of that's the exciting part of what they think they can get out of him.
Yeah, and certainly we've seen the value of that archetype of a guy who can both roll to the basket or pop, maybe even post up against mismatches. I kind of liked some of the touch that he showed off in summer league from kind of that 5 foot range, making the catch, keeping it high, and scoring. I don't know that he's kind of like, a high waisted player. So I don't know that he's ever going to be a dominating post threat.
Mhm.
He's kind of more Porzingis like in the sense that like, wherever he catches the ball, that's where he will be
Yeah.
shooting it, right? Like he's not going to move anybody any further, but he has a skill level. His hands are decent. And yeah, he's just massive in terms of his standing reach defensively. I don't think his feet are horrible for like this type of player, at least. I guess this is maybe a little bit outside of the scope of this season, but just as you look at him, is he going to be like the next Heat find? Like, can he be sort of get even into like a lower end all-star conversation, like even like a Miles Turner plus type of player? Do you think he could be that? Or is it more that we're just always going to kind of be chasing it with him? And it's tough to make that call after a year of his career, but what is your feeling? Is he like the guy who could be like, oh yeah, this is now a foundational piece for this group for the next 5 to 10 years? What's your feeling on
The
that?
the key word is I think he can. Like I
Yeah.
really do. Like when you just look at his pure skill set and the size, the shooting, like everything along the lines, he can. But I don't know if he will. I mean, that's going to have to be seen. It's tough to say. I think that's where the Heat kind of sit on it as well. It's just he can do it in spurts. He can do it even for a game. Like he could have a game where he kind of goes at it. But when you're talking about going out there every night, the thing that Spo I think hates more than anything else is having a guy when they throw that ball in the air for a jump ball. When he doesn't know what he's going to get from a certain guy on a random night, I just don't think that it's just not Spo. It's not for Spo. And that's kind of what they have with Kalel right now, where it's like, yeah, he could go out there and dominate this game. He could go out there and get a bunch of dunks. The three could be falling, get a bunch of blocks. But he also go out there and could stand around, not be a helper, get it scored on a bunch, and he sits on the bench in 3 minutes, and there's 9 minutes left in the first quarter. So it's just an unknown factor with him, what he can get to. I really do think his ceiling is so high. But I just think on a game by game basis, his floor is not as high as you'd want it to be. Like that's what they loved about Bam. I mean, Bam's floor was just so high when they first started playing him. It was like you knew what you were gonna get defensively, offensively. He wasn't gonna get in the way of things. It was just Kalel has these things where like he'll do something for 2 possessions in a row, and Spo is already at half court calling a timeout and getting into him. So we'll see what he can end up being. I mean, it feels like there was the height of his peak in the offseason around his hype was when he was being thrown in trade talks with Kevin Durant, and there was talks about Miami not willing to part with him. And now you're in a position where fans are a little bit lower on him because he lost his starting position at the moment. You're hearing his head coach kind of go out in press conferences, which by the way, Spo does not do often. Like everything is behind closed doors. So the fact that he's even doing it out in the public kind of tells you he's trying to get a message across. So it's just kind of a weird stance for Kalel right now where he's going to end up. But when you ask, like, can he get to a certain point? I really do believe he can because the guy is that talented.
Yeah, and perhaps that inconsistency and the desire to motivate him would make a more sense for him in a bench role, at least with this early group in particular, that is going to be a little light on creation. And that seems like Nikola Jovic. I know our Cooper Moorhead, our guy, did a video on his preseason yesterday, and it seems like he's always someone that he'd have been really high on. For me, I've appreciated the skill set, but always kind of wondered exactly how it fits in the team concept. Like, is this really someone that you're going to give the ball to? Doesn't he have these defensive limitations? Maybe he's not a rim protector. Like, he's a 4, but sometimes they just say these guys are a 4 because there's nothing else that they can guard, so they have to be a 4. His shooting, as he definitely is a really skilled player, but his shooting hasn't come along at like, an elite floor spacing level yet. He's got a lot of very raw tools. Where do you see him as far as being able to put that together this season?
Yeah, so you bring up the shooting. I mean, he was really peaking before the injury last year. I mean, the shooting was coming along, the off ball stuff was there, but the key word is the off ball thing. He's just not an off ball player. So the issue is there's a balance here. It's like when you have a certain team and you're trying to be a playoff team, you're not going to give the total on ball role and the usage to your 22-year-old, 21, 22-year-old player that he's not just going to run the show. But then there's the balance of like, if you want to maximize that player, you got to put the ball in his hands. You got to let him kind of work his magic a little bit with his playmaking and all that stuff. So that's kind of where they've been. And I think we kind of looked at this season when we originally thought Kalel was starting and Nico was coming off the bench. It's like, okay, well, if he comes off the bench, he can kind of be that on-ball role. Tyler ends up going out. Now he's in the starting lineup. And I think that's what they're going to lean. They're going to lean into him as kind of the engine of that fast-paced style that I was talking about earlier. Like that's kind of be their motivator of kind of playing faster. But he is just such a unique player because if you ask me, like, what is his best skill, I'd probably say his passing, but I could go in a couple different ways. I just think he's good at a lot of things. Like he's just somebody that you can't really figure out and say he's this. You can't really put him in a box. So it comes down to a couple things. He's worked on his stuff in the post because the way teams kind of figured him out was we're going to put a smaller player on you on the perimeter. We're not worried about you kind of putting your back to the basket because he just wasn't his game. He's kind of a guard in a big's body where he kind of played this role for Serbia where he was a guard. I mean, he was somebody that was playing the perimeter, running pick and rolls. He was not the roller. So teams throw these smaller players on him and it's forcing him to kind of play this low post role. So he's kind of adjusted to that, trying to figure that out now. The finishing stuff around the rim, he can get there. I mean, he's 6'10", 6'11", going off the dribble, can get by these guys that are slower footed. But it just comes down to the finishing stuff. So it's really just about putting everything together. I mean, he really does have all these different archetypes to him. It just, I mean, we're seeing things even in the preseason where he's kind of shooting these step back off the dribble threes. I don't know if it's going to be at that level. Like I don't see him running pick and rolls and running, flowing in a pull up threes. But I do think he's somebody that you need to put the ball in his hands, run the pick and roll to kind of hit the weak side corner, to hit the roller with Kalel or Bam. Because he kind of is their best pure playmaker on the team right now. If you're not counting their rookie, that's kind of his main skill. He's going to be just a vital part of this team. The thing is, if his scoring upside can set in, like if that's kind of what they're banking on. Like if he's somebody that you could say like can go drop 15, 16 regularly, like that's what they're ultimately banking on. They want to see him be that confident offensive player. But the thing is, you kind of hinted at something with inconsistencies. I've seen it with his jumper. It's kind of been up and down because he doesn't have like that pure, like locked in form where you kind of know what's going to be. It's kind of all over the place sometimes. So it's either on or it's off. And that leads into the scoring. He's not a mid-range player, so it's going to come at the rim. So if that all could settle in, if they could kind of figure that out, and that's kind of what the whole theme of the season in a lot of ways is. That's why I bring up his name a lot, is because he's going to be vital to this team if they're ultimately going to be a team that's at the top of the play-in tournament, or if they're out of the play-in tournament. He's going to be one of those players.
Yeah, to me, is that as well. It's interesting you said he's not as much of an off-ball player; he's more of an on-ball player. I agree in the sense that doing stuff with the ball, driving to the basket is his best skill. But I also am not sure that he's just your initial advantage creator. I think on the second side, you throw it to him with a little advantage. If he doesn't have someone in front of him, he can either take that open shot or he gets in the lane. He's 6'10" and he's got that slow step, the Euro step, decel moves that look pretty good. He's gotten stronger. He kind of knock guys back, or then you bring help over and he can make the right decision. So that's where he ideally would be to me. Maybe they could throw it to him in the post and he could make decisions out of there too. If he has a mismatch, they can do some split cuts, something along those lines. But yeah, I mean, I think, and then the grab and go stuff is good too, because he is skilled enough and a good enough finisher that you do have to get a body in front of him and then he can spray some passes out to shooters. So he's a versatile player, and all of these skills, like he's a jack of all trades, and hopefully this is the year that he really pushes either the shooting or the finishing or the passing to really be at a high level. And then if that's the case, they got a player.
For sure. I'll say about the secondary action thing, that's ultimately, I think, what they want to get to. But I think the initial, like, there's this thing where they talk about point Nico. Like, they want him kind of setting up and being that initial ball handler. And I think what they want, in theory, is like having the situations of teams where they can run Tyler and Powell on both sides and run actions around him, and he can kind of facilitate. Like, I think that is what they're thinking of as him as like that initial ball handler. But you're right. He's not going to be somebody that's kind of bringing the ball up the floor, then kind of flowing into offense for himself. Like that's kind of the key here. So if he's going to be that scorer, it's going to be off the secondary action. It's going to be, I mean, they did a couple things where he'd come off a pin down and drive, like some of these curl sets. They'd find different ways. I'm not a fan of them overly putting his back to the basket, because it's not him. Like they've kind of forced him to play that role at times. And I think this year there's somebody else in the team, and Jaime Jaquez, that they're kind of doing the same thing with. It's kind of just getting old of trying to like force things that aren't them and force them to these roles, where this year it's like, just let them go do what they're good at. Like, let Nico go grab the ball and go down the floor. Go let him get the ball in his hands and play make a little bit. Like, don't do these things where, yes, if he masters that, he's going to improve at another level. But it's gotten to a point now where they just kind of want to lean into the strengths of some of these young players. So, yeah, we'll see what the role looks like for him. I mean, the role for him is going to be one of the most interesting to note this season, and the Herro injury kind of derailed that a little bit, because I think they kind of had one in mind, and then now it kind of changes and almost puts more on his plate. And as we said earlier, the extension itself, I mean, they're betting on him. They're betting on him to not just be a role player off the bench that occasionally does some things. Like, no, he's going to be a foundational part of their young core here. So, yeah, we'll see what they lean into offensively.
A couple other guys I want to hit on quickly before we kind of move into putting all these pieces together and looking at the season as a whole. They going to get anything out of Jaquez this year?
It's, if there was a year and there was a time to do it, it would be in the first month of this season without Tyler. I mean, that would kind of be it, where you could kind of put him. Look, they did this thing in preseason where he ended up being the starter with Powell, Wiggins, Nico, and Bam for the first couple games. And it's like kind of getting back to what he was last season, where we just talked about it with an off-ball player. When you kind of play this role, he's not an off-ball player. Like, he's not, because the shot has not come along. The only time he was able to kind of figure things out was when he got those mid-post reps where he can kind of limit his dribbles and got to find ways to use the footwork, get inside. Teams kind of schemed around it, where they kind of were suspecting that spin inside that he would do time and time again. When he'd pick up his dribble, they would collapse. Like, there were just certain things that they would pick up on with him. And we just saw a real decline last season from his rookie year. I mean, he came onto the scene looking great. People were calling him Jimmy Butler light. Like, they were calling him all these things. And then you have a second year where he can't get on the floor in a broken season when Jimmy gets shipped out. So this is kind of a reset year. The only issue is there's somebody that plays a lot like him that is higher than him in the rotation. That's Pelle Larsson, which definitely hurt his stock and value on this team right now. But he's somebody that, as I referenced before, he says he needs to get back to what he was good at. And that is not shooting. That is not off the catch stuff. That is like I said, it's mid post up. It's putting his head down, trying to work the pump fake, the slow steps, all that stuff around the basket. The issue with that is the finishing kind of tanked last season. If you kind of look at the numbers, I mean, he just, it all kind of fell down at once. It wasn't just one specific thing. And like I said before, I keep saying all these guys are on ball players. And at a certain point, somebody's got to play off the ball. Somebody's got to be the role player. Somebody's got to be the shooter. And you cannot have a situation where all your players need the ball in their hands. It's just not a functioning offense. So I don't think they're going to lean into him, I think, the way they originally thought they would. I think he's going to be a spot rotation player without Tyler. Like, they'll throw him in and see what they can get. But the thing is that he's just like Nico, you could throw into a lineup and it doesn't really matter who else is out there. He could figure his role out. Whereas Jaime can only operate in certain lineups. Like, there's just a lot of lineups that I look at. If there's too many, if you have Powell and Wiggins out there and then you throw Jaime out there, it's not going to work. It's just not. Like, he just does. He needs the ball. He needs to be able to operate. He needs to get into kind of a flow state and a rhythm offensively. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting season for him. If anything's going to pop for him, we're going to know by November. Like, we're going to know by mid-November. It just feels like I don't know if they're selling out on him already, but I think they know what he is, so they're not going to just lean into it for a large portion of the season.
Yeah, like you said, he's kind of a scorer. It's hard to point to what other skill he has, but then even that kind of fell apart. My buddy David Locke likes to talk about how the second year can kind of be difficult for guys who have a nice rookie year because, okay, do you keep working and leaning in more into the things that you're already good at, or do you all right, well, hey, this guy could take the next step if he could just hit the corner three, or he can do all these other extra things, but then maybe you even lose what you're good at initially. Now, when what you're good at initially is scoring, then yeah, you do have to round out your game a little bit. But yeah, and then he's not really, he's rugged, he'll fight, but he's pretty slow of foot defensively. Maybe this newfound emphasis on transition could help him because he is good there running the floor and getting to the basket in transition. But yeah, I mean, it is ultimately kind of a limited skill set. And then yeah, I mean, Larson is someone who I haven't been as familiar with. All right, he's like a white shooting guard, foreign guy coming out of Arizona. All right, so he's probably just a shooter, but it really is a little bit more to his game than that.
Yeah, I wouldn't even call him. I mean, the shot has come around this offseason. I think that was kind of one of the big. He's been active this offseason. I mean, he's been in Eurobasket. He's been in Summer League. He's kind of been around. He's just been playing basketball for the last few months. But the shooting was kind of the last factor of the offense, kind of figuring it out. His jumper is not broken. I mean, it is a clean form. Like, he could shoot. But I think he was just such an off-ball menace, cutter, all of that, combined with the fact that if he gets the ball going downhill, like, he's going to run you over. Like, he's a bowling ball. Like, he finds way. He's on the floor 24/7. He gets the line. It's not normal that a second-round rookie comes in and gets the line consistently when he gets minutes as the way that he did. And I think that's what was just so impressive. It's just that he has this, he has a ruggedness to his game, and they like that. And the defensive thing, this is what's comparable with Pella and Jaime, is just Pella's just, he's layers ahead defensively. He's somebody, we talk about kind of their perimeter defenders they're going to lean to. Pella's going to be one of those guys. He's can guard baseline to baseline. He can guard bigger players because he is a bigger wing. He's just kind of found his role on this team quicker than I think anybody expected. Nobody expected him to be a rotation guy at any point last year. And seeing the way he kind of figured things out defensively that quickly and the offense came around. He's somebody as well. Like I said, he's been playing basketball the last few months. Summer League, Eurobasket, it's been on the ball. Like, he's scoring, he's running pick and rolls and doing all that stuff. But now it comes back to playing actual Miami Heat basketball, and it goes back to playing a role. He's somebody that I trust 100% to actually play that role. Where we talk about Jaime needing the ball, no, Pella can sit in the corner. Pella can be a baseline cutter. He can kind of figure things out. He could impact the game without even scoring the basketball because of the defensive stuff. So he's gonna be an interesting player for him. He's definitely come along quicker than anybody expected. And Spo likes him a lot. So they're going to lean into it. It just comes down to what actions they can run for him to kind of maximize him. Because I'm just still curious, even as good as he was in the offseason, like, is that on-ball stuff going to transfer over this season? I'm still trying to figure that out because it's just different environments. I mean, it's Summer League. Like, it's even Eurobasket. Like, he's playing such a different role. So if they could find something for him, like, it seems like he's going to be a core rotation piece this season for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be one of Spo's most interesting coaching jobs as we kind of move to looking at how this rotation is going to fit together. I think we've hit on most of the playing time battles at this point. Fontecchio is going to fit in there too as a backup 4, backup 3. I think like he's more than a shooter, although he didn't shoot last year.
Yeah.
He had a great shooting year his second year, but his first and third year he hasn't been good there. But he's actually a pretty solid individual defender who I think can do some switching, and that will lead to his skill set being valued. So I think he's another one of these guys who can kind of fit in any lineup. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned like Davion is good, maybe do more on the ball. Hero is out to start with. Obviously, Norm Powell had a career year last year. Andrew Wiggins is someone who, having been through that experience in Golden State, he can go crazy in certain games. He can disappear in other games. Jovic is another guy you just kind of don't know exactly what to expect from him. Maybe Ware could have a big scoring game. It seems like they have a lot of these options, so maybe they won't be leaning as much into the bam post up or attack off the dribble for a 15-footer. Maybe even they'll have Bam trying to shoot a little bit more. That finally came back towards the end of last year, which I was hopeful on that at the beginning of the season. Didn't happen, but they're just Spo. I think is gonna just be going to a lot of different looks depending on the
Yeah.
opponent, depending on who's hot. A lot of different combinations, and it's going to be a challenge for him. But he also at least maybe has more buttons to push than in past years.
Definitely more buttons. I mean, he's been a guy that's plays in these 9-man rotations consistently, and I think this is a year. I mean, look, if you're running this fast-paced style where you're just constantly running, like you ultimately have to use more bodies, and they actually have bodies this year. It feels like they have to run 10-man rotation anyway, but it's if you're going to keep running, you got to kind of keep functioning these guys in and out. Like even we've seen the way they've treated rookies. I mean, we all the rookies that we just mentioned, they didn't just jump onto the scene. A lot of them. I mean, Jaime was kind of a unique one where he ended up playing early on, but they kind of get stored where they get G League minutes. They kind of figure things out along the way. Maybe 3/4 through the year, like where he ends up getting some playing time. But a lot of times this happens, and I think there is a player, their rookie, Kaspers Yakichonis, that kind of surprised some people in this last game. I mean, he had 10 assists in this game. His playmaking was flashing. And it almost makes people think it's like, okay, is he going to be stored in the G League this year? Or is he going to be somebody that's sitting in that maybe 11, 12 spot on the bench that if things go wrong offensively, you throw your offensive player maker that has some upside out there to kind of figure some things out. So to your point, it does feel like this is an experimental year for Spo where he's somebody that's always held things close to the chest until playoff time. But there's a chance that playoff time isn't a thing anymore. Like you don't have this on-off button where you're like, okay, we could hold this back. Like, no. This is a year where you're almost having to just throw a lot of your stuff out during the regular season. As much as they won't admit it, when you're talking about contender status, like this is a year where you're going to have to figure out what you are. You have to figure out what you want to lean into, and you have to be willing to experiment. So it seems like they are. So yeah, I just want to see it more often. I want to see Spo. I know a lot of people are projecting like maybe he could be coach of the year status because I just don't see that happening because I don't know if their record's going to be good enough to kind of be that. I think a lot of years it's just best record ends up getting that a lot of ways or kind of the biggest surprise. So yeah, it's going to be a fun year for him. I think a lot of eyes are going to be on him, and it's just there's a lot of weight off his shoulders. I mean, we talk about the players and stuff with the whole Jimmy situation last year. This is kind of a breath of fresh air for Spo this year too.
Yeah, I think that's the case, and he'll have it. He has enough depth that if guys are not doing what he'd like them to do, he can. All right, go away. You're coming off the bench. Nikola Jovic, come on down. And yeah, it'll be interesting to me if you, as you said, he pulls out some more stops this year during the regular season because they haven't had a great regular season since 22, when they were the number 1 seed, and they obviously made the finals. They've had some good playoff moments. Not last year was not among them, of course. So yeah, I'm interested to see. We haven't seen this like Erik Spoelstra proven that he's a great coach really since those 23 playoffs, and obviously the Jimmy thing, some of the unavailability with him and all that plays into it. But yeah, maybe he could win Coach of the Year. Because I don't think he's ever won it, has he? He's never won it.
Nope.
So I think that it could be like a lifetime achievement thing, but also if they get to 47 wins, maybe that's the 4 seed in the East, and just simply having that number 4 next to their name, maybe that would be the narrative. It's always been in my top 2-3 coaches since we've been doing our coach rankings. But let's turn into just the overall team here. I think we've pretty much talked about all the lineup stuff. What do you see as the main strengths that Spo can try to rely on with this group?
I would say it's funny because I'm keep talking about offense, but I do think it is going to bog down back to the defense thing. So I think defensively, like these guys, these role players I'm mentioning, like Larson, like Davion, another guy I didn't mention, Drew Smith, is going to be playing a lot for them off the bench as kind of a defensive piece. So they have these kind of, other than Tyler and Powell, like they have defensive ball stoppers that I think they're going to lean into trying to get as much turnovers as possible, because I think they realized late in the year last year, like when they were turning over the ball or forcing turnovers and they were out and running, they were they were a better team. Like I said, the reason isn't just, when I say playing faster, it doesn't mean just transition points. Like they need to do things where it's working early in the clock. Like it's not Bam with 3 seconds left in the shot clock turning around and taking a late jumper. Like it's just doing things faster. And I think that's what they're ultimately going to lean into. And they have the possibility of doing that. So I'll say a strength is just leaning into their youth. I mean, their youth is just that in itself. So 3-point shooting is not where I'd say it usually. Like usually I'd kind of lean into that. And this is kind of a roster where it's kind of the opposite, where it's I'm trying to figure out where they're going to score if it's not on the break. I'm kind of worried about this team early in the year. When you just said 47 wins, and I'm thinking to myself, how are they going to score their way in the first 2 months of the season to 47 wins? So the strength is still going to be defense. Can Spo, that's a way to coach the year. If he can find himself to a top 4 seed, and it's through just pure grit, defense, and the way that he does it, I think he would end up actually getting a nod. So yeah, it really is. I'd say the strengths of this year is just leaning into their personnel for once.
Yeah, I think they do have versatility. I think they have some outs too, in terms of their depth. Where, all right, Jaime Jaquez, you're not part of this anymore. That's fine. We got other guys. We got Fontecchio behind you. We got Pelle Larson. Terry Rozier didn't work out. Well, they've managed to build that back up now with Davion Mitchell. And I think they have, well, they don't have that one guy. There should usually be a guy, especially once Herro comes back, who has an advantage. Maybe that's Bam going up against a smaller player. Maybe that's Jovic going up against a smaller player. Wiggins can get down there as well. The Herro pick and roll. I think they should be more threatening with some of their off-ball actions now with Herro and with Powell. They'll just have like a little bit more stuff they can run this year and a few more threats to kind of take advantage of the weak points of the defense. Like, between Jovic and Bam, I mean, that's a pretty good passing starting
Yeah.
4 and 5 as well. So you should have guys who have at least some experience with the ball and should have some advantage. So I think that's a strength. I think they're not as vulnerable to injury, other than obviously to Bam, who I wish we had time to talk about, but we're probably running out in terms of him. But I expect him to at least be a little bit better than he was last year offensively. So yeah, I think those are some of the strengths that I see. What about weaknesses?
I mean, I kind of hinted at one. I think 3-point shooting is going to be really interesting to begin the year, but I think overall it just comes down to how much Tyler and Powell can kind of pick up from deep. The main weakness, I'll say, I kind of mentioned it earlier, is the closing lineup stuff, because they have a lot of closers. They do. But it's kind of back to that thing where, do you want to lean into scoring or do you want to lean into defense? Because you're not going to lean into both. Like it's either you're going to play smaller, where you have a smaller 4, but you're going to be a little bit more versatile offensively, or you're going to play bigger, and I don't really trust you to score as much late in the game. So it's going to be a little bit of a trade-off. And with the way their offense has looked late in games, as you kind of mentioned last season, it almost feels like they're going to lean into that smaller way. And Heat fans have been excited about finally getting Kalel and Bam together, where they're not closing games where they're getting out rebounded and all this stuff. Like they're finally getting away from the small ball thing. But Spo is not going to trust Kalel where to close. I mean, he didn't last season. We're seeing the starting lineup thing going on. He's not going to be a closer consistently. I mean, I think right now it is Davion, Tyler, Powell, Wiggins, Bam. If you're just talking about your best players, throwing them out there. So you have Wiggins at the 4, and I'm looking at some of these bigger teams in the Eastern Conference where it's like, can that survive late in the games often? Like, can they figure that part of it out? So the overall weakness there is I just think that they're going to be small on occasion. Like there's even these lineups I'm seeing them planning to run where it's going to be a lot of, like, in some ways it's like a 4-guard lineup. Like we used to talk about 3-guard lineups. Like you could call it a 4-guard lineup at times. So they're going to be a little bit smaller. Like I said, they don't have, like, they picked up Precious Achua. They have some guys in the pipeline on 2-way contracts, but their big man depth is not there. So it's Kalel and it's Bam. So you wanted them to start, but you almost were forced to stagger them anyway. So even if they started next to each other, they probably weren't getting a lot of minutes next to each other anyway. No. So they're just a smaller team. So I am just worried about that specifically because even like Orlando, let's just call it. I'm just thinking of these examples that there's just a lot of these bigger teams in the Eastern Conference they're going to have to go up against. And I just worry about that late in the game, talking about defensively.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do think there'll be times, especially when Hero comes back, when Fontecchio would be maybe the best option in the closing lineup. Again, I'm higher on him than virtually anybody, and we'll see. I mean, if he doesn't make shots, then forget
Right.
about it, right? But I think he's at least a good enough shooter. He's going to get guarded out there. So like he and Wiggins, Bam, and then you'd go with Powell and Hero in the backcourt. Or yeah, again, maybe that's Davion instead, but they feel like they don't have enough size.
Yeah.
Or if Davion's shooting regresses. A couple other things from a statistical standpoint. Powell's a little better at this. He might help some, but I don't think they're really going to be that great getting to the foul line. I
No.
think they're going to be terrible on the offensive glass. They just don't have good offensive rebounders on this team. And I'm interested to see, defensively, they actually were fifth in defensive rebounding last year, and they've always been fine as long as Bam was on the floor with that. It just falls apart when he's off the floor. So maybe I think they'll be fine there, but they kind of last year's defense was top 10, but it was mostly built on not fouling, which Bam is
Yeah.
amazing at, and controlling the defensive glass. They're below average in opponent shooting and below average in forcing turnovers. Maybe they'll be a little bit better at that with a full season of Davion and of the ability to pressure a little bit more. But as I start to like put it together here, how do you see them ranking offensively and defensively?
Defensively, I still think they're going to be a top 10 defense. Like, as I said before, they find their way to that point. Like, they'll coach their way in. And I think they're going to lean into defensive lineups. Offensively, honestly, we could copy and paste post All-Star break numbers, and I think it'll probably look a little similar, honestly. Like, I think the offense will be a little faster, a little bit better, but we've seen this happen time and time again. I'm not maybe in that 15 to 20 range, maybe. And I'm
Yeah.
even hesitant to say that. Like, I still think this team is going to be in a position because it's going to get tainted a little bit even in the first 2 months when they don't have Tyler. I mean, the offense is not going to be pretty. There was some numbers. I mean, it's very low sample size, but let's say there was Powell, I think, played 2 games last year with the Clippers without Harden, and he averaged like 11 points a game in them and shot horribly. Like, it was a crazy shooting percentage. Very slow sample size. But the point is, when he is your main guy, like when he's the guy, your primary on ball scorer that teams are going out there and scheming up against, it's a lot easier. It's just an easier look. Like, you're going to need Bam or Wiggins to be a high end number 2 scorer. You're going to need either Wiggins to do it on a consistent basis that we've seen in the past, but it's going to have to be consistent, or Bam play at that post All-Star break level that he did last year where the jumper's falling. That's the only way you're going to make it work at that point in the season. And then when Tyler comes back, yeah, maybe it can kind of jump up a little bit because I think that gets to a point now where they can do some things they just haven't been able to before, where Tyler's actually be able to be off the ball again, and they could kind of play off each other. Where one of them, I mean, you can't really leave either one of them. So if one of them gets a little head of steam into the paint, it's just going to be easier opportunities. So maybe it rises at that point, but I would say best case scenario is 15 to 20, but I still feels like maybe a 20, 21, 22 type offense.
Yeah, before the Hero injury, I kind of had them in that 15 to 20 range. And of course, a season ago, he was essential to what they're doing. They're 8.6 points per 100 better when he is on the floor versus off. I mean, they were a worst in the league level of offense
Yeah.
when he was off the floor a season ago. But one of my questions too is like, what Tyler are we getting? Like last year, I thought was the first year that he truly got to the point where giving the ball to him was a good possession for the Miami Heat and not
Mhm.
necessarily just him. And he still really likes to go right, but he established some counters, and he had some games where teams just like couldn't really deal with him schematically, and that pick and roll with him and Bam was extremely hard for other teams to defend. And it wasn't just shooting the three off the dribble, but then he could also cross it back over, get to his mid range, which became really reliable, especially because he was getting a little bit closer to the basket. His floater was better. He started passing it more. Like he was, I don't know that he's the engine of a high level offense, but certainly he was
Mhm.
someone that made a huge difference for this team, which was one of the first times that had been the case. My question though is, he's coming off this surgery for, it seemed like spurs in the back of his ankle.
Mhm.
And how long does it take him to get back to that form? Does he get there? Because he had reached a new level. Now he's coming off surgery, coming back to the middle of the season. Then he'll be in a minutes limit. Then he won't be playing back to back. He's going to have to integrate with a totally new team. Does it take until the All-Star break or maybe even next season before he gets to that same level that he was at a year ago? Because he was really good, and I just
Yeah.
like, it's really a shame that he suffered this setback.
Yeah, the foot just scares me more than an injury like he had with the hand, where you just know, like, yeah, the shooting could be something, but like, no, this is something that he's going to be putting his whole weight on and running down the floor and everything. Yeah, it's a worry. I mean, he gives the normal player response where it's going to be, he's going to get back quicker than the timeline is, which you always hear with these guys. And if you know the Heat, I mean, it ends up always being longer than the timeline they usually give. So this is kind of a weird balance, but they're not going to be in a position. I mean, I think some people think he could even come back initially, maybe for the first game or two, and come off the bench just to kind of work him in slowly. But my more overall thing is like, okay, when he comes back, I mean, it really depends on how they look at that point and where the offense is. But like, can you suffice putting him off the ball and letting him be an off-ball player for maybe 5 games, 5 to 10 games, where like you could kind of use him as almost like a spot-up shooter, where he's not like running constant pick and roll after pick and roll like we saw last year, where it's not all on him to get the paint and clear and kind of kick out. Like, can you get Powell, Bam, and Wiggins in enough of a rhythm before he comes back where you can allow him to kind of work in slowly? I think that's kind of the key to it all. But yeah, he's definitely one of the, we probably don't talk enough about him because he's the key to their everything. Like Tyler offensively is the key to them working. I mean, last year it kind of came in with this game plan where it was all threes and layups. It was like no mid ranges, even though that was his game. And he kind of leaned into it early in the season where he was putting up like 10, 11 threes a game. And it was working. But teams figure that out eventually and start chasing off the three. As you mentioned earlier, he started leaning into that mid range even more. And I think that's kind of what Spo figured out too, is like, yeah, you kind of have to do the threes and layups thing to an extent because you have a guy in Tyler Herro who's a knockdown mid range shooter that's the only shot on the floor that they're giving him. He's going to have to take it. So he did. He started working the floater again. He started working the mid range, and that's what they're going to have to do again this season. But I think there's an opportunity to make things a lot easier on him offensively this season with Powell. And the thing is just how he's going to look with that foot. I mean, neither of us could predict how it's going to look when he does come back. I don't know if it'll be all-star break level. Like, I do think latest is December that he's going to come back. But as you said, it's how is he going to look when he gets back in December? Like, is it going to be fluid? I know he's been walking around, honestly, like it's not a big deal. I know he has, different taping on it and different things that they're treating it with, but he's looked mobile enough where it's not something I don't think is getting too stiff. So it's not something I'm worried about to that level, but it is going to be a little bit adjustable when he does get back.
Yeah, it seems like this is something that, is like a congenital issue, maybe been bothering him for some time. So maybe it is something where he'll be able to get back. It's more of like a bone issue, which you
Yeah.
usually feel better about. So I think ultimately, I'm going to say defensively, these guys are kind of more in the 10 range than the 5 range, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
even more likely to be mid pack than top 5, I would say, because they don't, like I said, especially if they're going to go more offensively focused,
Yeah.
like Spo's good coach. Bam is still one of the best defenders in the NBA. Like that gives you a floor. And, we'll see what Davion and Wiggins are going to be able to give them there. But I don't think they just have the talent to really contest shots amazingly well on the perimeter, force a lot of turnovers. I think it's going to have to be kind of more of a control what you can control sort of defense, and then we'll have a couple of guys that we're really relying on the perimeter. So I kind of have them 10th, 11th, 12th
Yeah.
defensively, and then with Herro, I think they could get it up to mid pack. Like they do have more playmaking than they've had in the past. You mentioned Powell struggling without Harden. They don't have the traditional point guard, but I think they do have guys that can kind of at least get him set up to where he doesn't have to just set up the pins and knock him down on a high pick and roll. He can catch the ball on the move. So and he is very efficient. They haven't had that efficient of a scorer on the perimeter in a long time. So but I still see them probably being low 20s offensively, and maybe higher than that when Hero comes back. But again, there are questions about that. So I think ultimately I'm going to go with exactly 41 wins for this group.
It's funny because I was sitting around 40 and 42. That's kind of where I was. But my question is, I mean, I'll ask you. I mean, I'm just curious to see where that lands them, honestly. Like I think this team, I think their Vegas line's like 37.5, I think right now. And I see them
Yeah.
as like a 40-win team. But I'm just so curious to see what in the Eastern Conference, like what does 40 wins even get you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I got to actually load up my my predictions. But I think it's maybe a play-in matchup with the Bulls.
I mean, yeah, that's a given. You have to have that. Even if they're the 4 seed, you have to have a play matchup with the Bulls.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see whether the Hawks graduate out of that exalted realm this year or not. But yeah, so do you want to make a semi-official prediction for right now, at least, as we sit a week and a half before the season starts?
So you mean seed?
No, it just so is you're going 40 and 42?
I would say 40 and 42. That's where I would say the seed is probably kind of my harder. I mean, 40 I think is a good benchmarker for them, considering all the things they went through last season and what they can ultimately get to. The seed is just much harder to predict because I can't really figure out where a lot of these other teams are going to slot in. Like, this seems like the hardest season to just figure out where things are going to land in the Eastern Conference. So, I mean, that's almost a good thing for a team like Miami. I mean, with the mindset that they have, I think they feel like things are wide open where they have a chance to kind of be competitive in the regular season and kind of get a higher seed, and they could fight for it. Because as we've seen in the past, I mean, sometimes I'm not saying they tank it, but like, I mean, Jimmy didn't care as much about regular season as he did the playoffs. So like, there was a lot of games off. There was a lot of adjusting, where this is kind of a season in a camp where Spo is coming in and kind of lay out a game plan for the regular season that actually is linear with what their like long-term plan is for the season. Like, there's not like these two bulletin boards of things. They have one plan. Which I think is just going to just clear the minds of the coaching staff and the players. So this feels like I do think that they're over where maybe a lot of people are suspecting them to be. I just think that the Tyler injury is not going to end up being as vital and maybe as people are bumping it down to be. I think he's going to come back quicker and going to be good on immediate impact. And I think Norm acquisition is going to be vital for the team to kind of carry them to that point. So I would say 40 wins. I think that's kind of a good benchmark of where I am.
Yeah, granted, it's during the kind of tank-tastic part of the season, but once they got over that crazy stretch where they just were punting away every close game, they were a solid 500 level of team after that. And yeah, you discount a little bit because the whole league was tanking down the end of the season. But yeah, I think they got better for once they are, of course, fully healthy. Now, if they just totally fall off a cliff right away, they do have their pick this year. Maybe that changes the imperative at least a little bit here, but they still have Bam. That's still going to give them a floor. To answer your question here, so here's what I have: all the teams that I've done so far ahead of them. I've got Cleveland with 59. I've got the Knicks with 52. I got Orlando 51. I've got so those are the only teams that I would say are just like so obviously ahead of them. Yeah. And then maybe, Atlanta, I think will be a comfortable playoff team, 45. The Bucks, I'll probably pick them for like 43, 42, something along those lines. Toronto, I actually have at 42. I like them better. I picked Chicago for 35. So I think I would put them in a group ahead of Chicago. I just think they're way more talented than them. Yeah. Detroit is another group that I think will be kind of in that same range as them. I'm not among those who thinks Detroit is going to take the next step to get into the high 40s this year necessarily. Am I forgetting anybody? I think those are all of them. And I think they're going to be better than Boston and Indiana. I think both those teams are going to be worse than expected. So that's kind of where I have them. I mean, 7, 8, something like that.
That's what I'm saying. I think what they're seeing is I think there is a pathway to getting to 6, and that's the ultimate goal here. I mean, if they're in a season, I think they're trying to get out of this play-in realm that they seem to be in every single year that they can't escape. But there does seem like there's a pathway with a lot of those teams that you're a little hesitant even with it. I mean, like we're talking about teams like you could see Atlanta finishing 4, but like you could also see them being a playing team if things don't roll their way. I mean, we've seen things with injuries with that team. There's just a lot of unknown with 4 through 8, I guess, in the East, where Miami does see a pathway. So the other thing is in the East, I mean, talking records, I mean, it's kind of a balance because I'm looking at a lot of these games. Like, there's a lot of winnable games that they're playing some of these worst teams. But if Miami, I don't trust them as much against some of these worst teams. Like, if you're talking about a random injury-ridden Pacers team on a random night, I don't like that game as much as I like them getting up for like a game against the Bucks on TNT. So they have to kind of figure that part of it out. I think they have to kind of be full throttle on the regular season mentality. And like I said earlier, I think not the new era of this without Jimmy, and kind of now they're going to have to focus on the regular season even more and take it a little bit more seriously, I think helps their cause in terms of like getting to that record and in the regular season, getting to that seed. So we'll see. But I don't think that's ridiculous. I mean, I think that's an understandable kind of ranking of the teams, but I think I mean, you're mentioning the wins. I mean, we're splitting hairs, right? I mean, we're talking
Yeah.
about 41, 42, 43 wins. Like it really could be a case where if Miami figures out certain things and gets hot, they could be a team that's not in the play.
So yeah, and I'm actually more interested in this Heat season than I have been the last couple of years, just because there was always this, all right, how real is it? How hard is Jimmy playing? There was all that drama. It kind of just seemed like the same thing over and over again. Now they're just new guys, Jovic, Ware. Like these guys are pretty interesting to me. That I want to see what they're going to look like. And so I think they should actually be a more entertaining watch than they've been
Yeah.
in the past. All right. So where can we keep up with everything you're doing on the Heat this season, Brady?
You can follow me at Brady Hawk 305 on Twitter. Doing some writing for Sports Illustrated on Sports Illustrated, so you can catch me there for the Heat site and the Five on the Floor podcast. So that's pretty much it.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us, Brady. And thanks so much to everyone who listened. If you're listening on the free feed, you can use the code. Let me make sure I actually get it right here since I just did it. This is the first time I'm promoting it. The code is preseason25 to get 35% off a membership to Dunc'd on Prime for a year. But of course, this is on the free feed. So thanks so much for listening even to that. We'll talk to you all next time. Till then.